Well, hello, my friends. It is an interesting morning here on Dattitude Podcast. The Saints coming off a 42-34 loss to the Arizona Cardinals last night. Jeff Duncan joining me live from Glendale or Phoenix. I'm not sure where you are. Where are you?
Neither. I'm in Scottsdale.
Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah. Well, Dunk will be getting on a plane in a little bit, so he's going to join us for Dattitude this morning. And, it is what it is, Dunk. It's a performance that I don't think any of us expected. The Saints had been playing a little bit better, and certainly the part that was unexpected were the turnovers by Andy Dalton in the first half that basically led to their demise. 64 seconds, and to me, the season's over.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would go that far, but it's certainly a imposing hole that they've dug. 2-5. The Eagles started 2-5 last year and made the playoffs. I think the best thing the Saints have going for them is the division is so non-competitive that they do still have a chance. But I think more than anything, Jim, it's the mistakes that they keep having, they keep compounding. They're not just a false start penalty here or there. I mean, we're talking about game-changing plays, pick sixes, things like that. You just can't overcome when you're as beat up as the Saints are right now. They really have very little margin for error, and they've got to find a way to dig out of this. And I think everyone's looking for solutions and trying to assign blame, and I really think it's difficult to do because this team is so injury riddled right now that's kind of where it starts. That's really the root of the problem, in my opinion, and then that creates a bunch of cascading problems from the root. You end up with a guy like Marquez Callaway lets a ball go off his hands. It's a pick six. He normally wouldn't be in that prime of a role if you had other players out there. These things start happening because you're playing a lot of different players, a lot of guys maybe in roles that they're probably not positioned for.
Jeff Duncan with me this morning, Dattitude episode number 106. Live every Friday here on all these same NOLA.com and bet.nola.com social media stations. And we already have a couple comments. We're going to get to them in just a moment. If you would like to leave a comment, we'll be glad to show it and read it here on the air. If you have a question for Jeff Duncan or myself, we'll be glad to read that as well. After this is over, I'm going to put this in our regular podcast spot. And you might be interested to listen to my monologue if you're a masochist, because I'm not, Dunk's not being positive, but I am way less positive than Mr. Duncan is, and that's usually the case. But I try to tell it like it is, and the words that I used this morning after that game in my monologue were embarrassing, unacceptable, and inexcusable. And I know you come up with you talk about the injury excuses, but Dunk, you look back to last year. This team had started more players than any. I think it was more than any team had ever started in NFL history. And they found a way to go 9-8. So to be 2-5 with the schedule they've had and the chances that they've had, to me, are simply inexcusable.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, I think part of the issue right now is you have a new coach and a couple new coaches in coordinator positions that they weren't in last year. So you kind of have a little bit of a crisis of adversity early on. And then, no one could have foreseen this, I think, happening this early. And so now all these different people in leadership positions are being tested. Yeah. And I think that's really where this team is at. I know Alvin Kamara, after the game, gathered the team and kind of said, this is not Saints football. Well, part of the problem with that, in my opinion, is what this whole group and this coaching staff and this whole organization has known as Saints football the last decade and a half has really been identified and defined by Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and they're not here right now.
That's right.
So that's where I see the crisis right now. That the leadership. I use this analogy, and this is probably a bad one, but if you saw The Godfather, the great movie, they're almost in a war right now, and they need a wartime consigliere. And it's not Tom Hagen, right? Remember, they need someone with that type of leadership. And so I'm not assigning blame to Dennis Allen because I think he's inherited just a really bad set of circumstances. But in this situation, he is really going to be tested as a head coach, because this adversity is coming at him from all sides, and everyone's looking at him. He's the head coach, and we're going to find out what he's made of, really, to be honest with you.
We're going to get back to Dennis Allen because I have some things to say about him in a little bit. I talk about him in my monologue, but there's an interesting clip, and we didn't get a chance to talk because before the show, so I didn't get a chance to tell you one of my plans. But there was a clip last night that I found interesting, and Jim Moore is always good for a quote. And listening to Fletcher and Jim Moore and Sharif Ishaq on the Channel 6 show last night, there's a 1 minute clip that I want to play here, and it goes to this question or a comment, I guess. Field Guy 316 says, "Why is everyone saying the season is over? There are 10 more games. It could happen." Just saying, Field Guy, you definitely want to listen to my monologue and how I finish it, but it goes to this clip, which I also played. So those of you who are listening to the podcast itself, you've heard this already, but it's worth hearing again. And I think it's interesting. So listen to this real quick.
Let's go now live to our colleagues on the field, Sharif Ishaq and Jim Moore. And Sharif, you want to ask Jim a question for us? Ask him, is the season over? I know he likes when I ask him that.
What? Oh, no. Fletcher wants me to bait you.
Bait me for what?
He wants me to bait you to ask this question. You ready? We're live. 2 and 5.
Question.
I get to ask you this question on live TV once again, like we did 6 years ago after the Saints lost to the Falcons. Is the Saints season over now that they're 2 and 5?
Oh. Did Fletcher say that?
I mean, yeah, it's live right now. He's asking you.
Huh?
He's asking right now.
Is he?
Yeah, it's live. He wants to know, is the season over?
Are we on?
Yeah, we're live.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Fletcher, you're full of you know what. When you think the season's over at 2 and 5, get out of here, man. What kind of a supporter are you? You live in New Orleans. You were born in New Orleans. You were raised in New Orleans. And you're saying the season's over at 2 and 5? Give me a break. Holy mackerel, Fletcher. What kind of a loyal Saints fan and supporter are you? Blows my mind. Get out of here, man. Season over. Holy mackerel. Hell no, it's not over. What if they won 5 in a row? Be 7 and 5. They'd be in the hunt. You never know. Every week's different. Get out of here.
Now let's go now live.
What if they win? What if they win 7 in a row? I mean, 5 in a row, Dunk. I mean,
That's my
come on.
point. You just don't. Well, you just don't know. I mean, it only takes one game, and things can turn around. I know that sounds naive and hopelessly optimistic, but this team's got a lot of talent. The problem is a lot of the talent is on the sideline right now. A lot of the key players, and But here's the thing: I think we're all dancing around the other issue here, and that is they really do have a quarterback issue, and this is a quarterback-driven league, and the Saints don't really have one right now. Now, they've got 2 solid players, but when they make mistakes like this, they're not even solid. They're killing the team, and it kills the morale of the team during the game. You can see the body language change once that kind of implosion happened at the end of the first half.
Well, to that point, and I don't agree with him, but that's okay. I mean, I don't have to agree with you. We'll read all your comments and questions, and then we'll talk about them. Crulo says, let's give Dalton a few more games. I could see some positives despite a couple of errors. And the problem to me is it's not just a couple of errors. There's a reason why Andy Dalton is a backup quarterback. And look, his stats, if you just look at the periphery and take his stats, you're like, well, he threw for 4 touchdowns. He threw for 360 yards or whatever it was. I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, those picks, and one of them wasn't his fault. I get that. But you can't make those errors. That, to me, worse than and I'm not kidding, worse than the pick sixes was the first one. You're driving down to take a pretty nice lead. You're going for 2 out of 3 drives to start the game, get touchdowns, and you cannot throw that interception right there. You eat it. You take the field goal. You get to 17 points right there. The team was kind of rolling, and I think to me that things just changed emotionally with this team after that first interception, which was just awful.
Well, right now, I almost asked this of some of the players after the game, but I've covered teams that get in these kind of funks like this, and it's almost like whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
Yep.
And then it starts to become almost an inevitability. You're waiting for the crisis to happen. You're waiting for the mistake or the adversity. And that's what it definitely felt like last night. And then it just kind of avalanched on them. But Dalton is what he is at this stage of his career, and I don't want to take anything away from his career because he was a very good quarterback. He went to multiple Pro Bowls, took teams to playoffs, but he's at the end of his career. I think everybody would admit that. At this stage, he's best served as a relief pitcher, not for the long haul. And I think that was my point with the column I wrote a couple of weeks ago. He's more of a trailer than a truck. He can't carry the team. He has to be pulled along by the team and manage the game. And last night didn't manage it very well.
Georgia says crisis of adversity does not equal the expectation of the team. I support the Saints and I'm a season ticket holder, but we must be able to modify these positions and everyone must step up. We have a lot of talent. Let's go Saints. Look, part of my problem, and I guess I wouldn't have as much of an issue if I thought the team was going into the season with just the talent of, let's say, the Falcons, who are overachieving, because this team has the talent to be we all thought, look, when everybody in the local media picked them to have 10 or more wins, I knew it was trouble because it never happens the way that everyone thinks is going to happen. But that being said, the fact that everyone in the local media picked them to win 10 or more games shows you that we all think that they have the talent to be a good team, and that they're just not playing like it. And I don't care about the injuries. Again, Sean Payton would have won that game last night. And I'm not going to try to get too hard on Dennis Allen. It's only 7 games in his career as head coach here. And I know that he's probably got a long way to go. But I'm not sure that his personality and his rah-rah, I guess, sometimes you need a kick in the ass. And I don't know that this team has gotten one yet.
Well, that's what I was getting at earlier. I mean, in his defense, I don't think anybody anticipated this widespread spree of injuries, and that's put them in this position in a lot of ways. Now, let's also be clear. They've got a lot of areas of the team that are not playing well that we all expected them to play much better. The defensive line, again, is really not producing. The interior defensive line is basically a non-entity on this team. They really don't get much of anything out of either defensive tackle. They have 4 that they rotate. And then Marcus Davenport is sitting here at half a sack. I know people talk about his pressures, but at some point you have to get home, and he's just not doing it. So, that's where this whole defense, everything starts up front, and they're just not getting the production out of that group right now. And it's when your secondary is as banged up as it is, and you're playing guys off the street and undrafted free agents and things like that, that's just a recipe for disaster, and that's kind of how it's playing out.
Jim Derry, Jeff Duncan, live on this Friday morning on the Dattitude Podcast. We're live every Friday at 9:15, whether we like it or not. And Dunk's got a lot going on, so I know he wasn't thrilled about doing this show. He's got people all around him, and Dunk, I really appreciate you coming on and doing it this morning. I want to look at the stats from last night because I think they tell a story. And the Saints, and I know a lot of these were garbage yards, but almost 500 total yards. It reminds me of the 7 and 9 Saints teams that we went through those 3 seasons, and that's kind of how this team is played. I mean, it's not just a lack of emotion, I guess, but another point that this team has talent. You limit the Cardinals to 326 yards. Kyler Murray wasn't anything special last night, 20 of 29 for 204 yards and a touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins came back and had half of his yards. So, I mean, the Saints did what they needed to do, but the problem was they couldn't put it all together at times. And, the defense was good in the first half. You get the pick sixes. And then in the second half, when the offense finally started going, then the defense started to, couldn't get anything together.
Yeah, I think statistics in a game like that are almost irrelevant because the game was decided at the end of the first half. Once they got that 2-touchdown lead, the second half just felt like it was playing out the string.
Yeah,
it was all really Arizona needed to do was punch in one more touchdown, I think, and the game was going to be over. And that's kind of how it played out. So to me, the mistakes they're making, Jim, they've had 4 giveaways returned for touchdowns. They lead the league in turnovers. I mean, they're doing things that you just can't do, and everybody knows this, and it continues to happen. They talk about emphasizing it, but they're playing with players that can't avoid it. That's the problem. They're just not good enough to avoid these mistakes at this high level of competition. But I don't know the solution. Is changing quarterback going to do it? I don't know.
Well, going back to Aaron's question, he has how many interceptions does the Saints defense have? I can answer the question. I remember it. It's 1. Tyrann Mathieu has a pick. I think it was in the Dome, I believe.
No, it was against the Vikings.
No, it was against the Vikings, right, in London. So they have 0 in the United States of America, by the way. And JJ says statistics are like bikinis. They conceal more than they reveal. I think the point of the stats, though, in this case shows that the Saints have the talent. I'm not saying that stats tell the whole story in this game because they don't. The Cardinals clearly won this game. It really wasn't that close. But I still think a Sean Payton coach team would have found a way to win this game, even with the 2 pick sixes. They come out of the locker room, Dunk, and they settle for a field goal. They get a 3 and out, settle for a field goal, get another 3 and out, and then have to punt after they get the ball near midfield. That you just can't do that.
Yeah, I know. I just feel like they're kind of that analogy. They're in a gunfight with a knife. That's what it feels like in these games. They don't really have a huge playmaker. Now, obviously, they got an incredible big play right off the bat from Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
They got a big play from Kevin White. But these are guys that weren't meant to be playing in prime time. They just weren't. So eventually, over a course of a 60-minute game, the inevitability the talent takes over, and they're playing against much more talented opposition. And when you make those kind of mistakes, Ryan Ramczyk have 2 false starts last night. They just they seem to lack a focus, maybe an intensity or an edge. There's something missing, and that's what I've noticed the most about. And I don't want to keep harping on Sean Payton, but Sean Payton had an intensity on game days. We all know that. And he provided an edge on game days. And I just haven't seen it throughout the whole team. It's just not there. I don't know if they're missing it from Quan Alexander and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, or we're reading too much into this. But there just is a couple of national reporters at the game last night that had not seen the Saints all year after the game told me there's just no juice in this team right now. They're seeing it. They're seeing it from a fresh perspective.
That's kind of my point. And a Sean Payton team would have gave him a kick in the pants at halftime. Would have gave him a kick in the pants 4 weeks ago. And look, I know it's probably not in Dennis Allen's DNA, but look, sometimes if you don't have enough talent, look, this team doesn't have the talent of the 2009 Saints or the certainly not the 2011 Saints. I get that. No one, I don't think, realistically thought this team was going to win a Super Bowl. But this defense, I don't understand. Isn't this the same defense that Dennis Allen coached to be with the 4th, 5th ranked defense in the NFL last year? And they're just kind of moping around. Again, injuries. Marshawn Lattimore, I get it. Paulson Adebo, I get it. I understand that. But there's no way this team should be playing like they're playing. And Tyrann Mathieu, I don't know what he's doing out there. And I don't always agree with our friends that watch the show and listen to the show on a regular basis, but Tyrann Mathieu looks like he's ready to go home and call it a career.
Yeah, I don't feel that way. I talked to him after the game, and you can tell he's trying to find his spot in the defense. But again, this is a convergence of factors. I don't think it's one thing; it's everything. And that is, you got 2 new safeties trying to work their way in. And now you got your corners are out, and you're not getting production for your defensive tackle. People are focusing on your defensive ends. There's just a lot of things going wrong with the defense. And I know in the past, their defense has not produced a lot of interceptions just in general. That's not something they get a lot of because they play so much man-to-man. Their backs are to the ball. They're more concerned with breaking up the pass. That's kind of how their defensive scheme works. They'll eventually get them. But this has never been a big interception type team. More than that, Jim, it's more about like running to the ball and effort and intensity and juice. I just don't see it. I don't see in the body language, and I haven't seen it really for much of the year in that defense. And that's what mostly defense is just effort and energy. And it's just like they're out there kind of going through the motions to some degree.
And to me, that goes to the point of, I know players get hurt, but here we go again with Michael Thomas, and I understand he's got a toe injury, whatever. I mean, Uncle Big Nick says, how does Brian Robinson get shot twice, misses 4 games? Michael Thomas misses 4 games with turf toe. I mean, there's no effort from your $10 million man. I mean, if he was, you can't tell me that he wouldn't be found a way to get out there some kind of way. And then now he's got some other injury. It just, the players that are out there, I know that they're professionals and they're doing their jobs, but damn, man, it's more about it's about more than just doing your job and showing up.
Well, I think the turf toe injury, I've covered a lot of players with that. I mean, those things can be lingering. I mean, if you remember, Max Unger had one. I think he was out 6 to 8 weeks. I remember Mark Ingram getting it. I remember Mark Ingram got one where he played the whole second half.
Yes, he did.
And then was out for weeks after that. It's a weird injury. And so I know there's frustration with that. But, this is now, the third different injury that Mike
Well, that's
Thomas
kind of my point. It's not just the turf toe dunk. It's always something with this dude. I mean, we're now 2.5 seasons into, what have you got in your money? You're talking about $25 million that have basically been flushed down the drain because Michael Thomas hasn't been here for 2.5 years, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're stuck with him, and it's like some other guys I remember. I sort of going off the rails a little bit, but I remember talking to Mike New one day at Voodoo practice and asking him why he didn't want to coach in the NFL. And Jonathan Sullivan was running up this. Well, I shouldn't say running. I should say walking up this hill. And we know what a bust he was. He got his $11 million, and he even said $11 million. I mean, once he got his money, he disappeared. And I know there are players like that, but I mean, you can't give those kind of contracts to players. And now it's showing the Saints are in salary cap hell, and they're stuck with Michael Thomas, a guy that, to me, he could say whatever he wants. He fooled me because I thought he was going to come back with a vengeance this year, but you keep getting injury after injury after injury or whatever it is. At some point, you have to start questioning some things.
Well, I've talked to some people around Mike Thomas that say he's rehabbing all the time. He's trying to get back. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But at some point, when you're paying players like Mike Thomas, they're your $20 million players, the players that you're giving second contracts to.
Right.
You have to get production out of them.
That's right.
And that's the problem. They've got too many guys that are being paid that aren't producing. I mean, just look at this last game. Andres Pete didn't play. Jarvis Landry didn't play. Marshawn Lattimore got a second contract. He's one of the highest paid players on the team. So you got a lot of key guys that you're expecting production for being paid, and they're not playing. It's just hard to overcome that after a while. And look, they've had some players regress. There's no doubt about it. David Onyemata is not the same player he was 2 years ago. He's just not.
No
and
question.
that happens in the NFL. It happens all over the league. And that's when you have to have good drafts to replace these players. And part of the problem I think that we're running into right now is the Saints kind of built a house of cards. And if everything went right, they were going to compete this year. And instead, it's fallen apart. The cards have all fallen because it was very precarious, because they had to go all in the last few years of the Drew Brees tenure and try to win a Super Bowl. So they kept using salary cap money down the road. And to do that, you've got to draft well, because you can't go out and patch holes in free agency. And frankly, Jim, they've kind of fallen back into that mess that they were in, what was like 5-7 years ago, where they were going out in free agency trying to fill holes. And look how that happened back to the Jarius Bird days, where they had some really bad mistakes. That's what it's starting to look like right now, because these free agents they brought in this offseason have not produced.
Yeah, Brandon Browner. How did that work out?
Yeah.
Anyway, look, JJ, I didn't want to ignore your question. By the way, we have, and I'm going to show it in just a second, we have about 15 minutes left on the live portion of the Dattitude Podcast. Jim Derry along with Jeff Duncan, who is live from Scottsdale, Arizona. And so if you want to get in any comments or questions, now's the time. We'll throw it out here on the pod. And then again, after this is over, I'm going to go and put the whole thing up with my monologue. And also, best bets. Uncle Big Nick and I have our best bets of the week. We've been doing pretty good with them. So if you've been following them, you've been making a little bit of money. So you come find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Just search for Dattitude. JJ asked, How do you guys see the team addressing the quarterback issues in the offseason? No first-round pick. I mean, that you just talked about the free agency situation. I think that's one position where you're probably going to have to go out into free agency if you even can.
Yeah, I think that's where I think a lot of the frustration is coming from Saints fans, and rightfully so, because if you have like a bad season or have things go against you like this, there's always hope for tomorrow, right? There's always, oh, well, this is just a bad year, we'll chalk it up. But I think Saints fans are so smart and sophisticated, they know that this future isn't bright either because of the salary cap limitations, because of the draft pick limitations, that there's not a lot of opportunity. They're going to have to really thread the needle to try and find a quarterback. And that just doesn't happen in this league. There's only about 10 to 12 really elite ones, and everybody else is trying to find one of those guys. They don't become available very easy. Look what the Denver Broncos paid to get Russell Wilson, and it's been a disaster. So I don't have a good answer. I do know it's a good draft for quarterbacks, but the Saints don't have much capital unless they want to start moving some of their assets. And I'm not sure they're at that point right now. I mean, 2-5, you still have an opportunity. These next 2 games are winnable. Actually, the next 3 games are winnable because they're all teams that we all thought, like the Saints, were going to be good. But Las Vegas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, even the Rams are teams that certainly the Saints have the ability to beat if they play well, but they've got to start playing well, and that's been elusive so far.
Yeah, you see the remaining schedule on the screen there if you're watching and not just listening. Like Dunk said, I mean, winnable, sure. I mean, any of these games are winnable. I mean, there's not a single game on the Saints schedule that isn't winnable. But when you keep falling at 2-5 and you keep finding ways to lose, which is the most frustrating part, you can make a case, I guess the Saints really could be 1-6, but you could also make a case, Dunk, that they could be 5-2.
Yeah, I know. I think that's what's also frustrating for people is they know this team has been in almost every game. And yesterday was the first game they really were kind of out of by about the third quarter. And these games coming up, they can win, but they've got to get players back. And I think until they get Mike Thomas and Marshawn Lattimore and some of their real difference makers back, and Jameis Winston said after the game that he feels like he's getting close to being fully healthy. It'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback.
I don't think there's no debate, and there may be a debate amongst fans, but any realist, anyone who has any slight knowledge of football knows that Andy Dalton cannot lead this team anywhere but in a deep dark hole. I'm sorry, but he can. The upside of Jameis Winston is so far beyond the upside of Andy Dalton. You know what you're going to get with Andy Dalton. You're going to get this. I mean, you're going to go. Last night was an outlier. He's not going to throw 3 picks a game. I get it. He's going to probably average 1 a game, and that's fine. And I know Jameis has his floor is way below Andy Dalton's floor. But this team needs to take risk. And Jameis Winston is the risk guy. So I don't think there's any debate. I mean, we can sit here and debate, and fans can tell me that I'm wrong. They always do. It's fine. But I don't think there's any question. When Jameis Winston says, I can play football, he's got to go back in there because he is the only chance this team has to salvage anything from this season.
Yeah, I think that's where this team's at, right? They're kind of in a little bit of a crossroads. The season's going to go one of 2 ways. I will say this, talking to players in the locker room, they're not pointing fingers yet. They're not fractured. And I've seen teams do that when things go bad, and they haven't done that yet. So that's a good sign, but they've got to get healthy. They got a little bit of a break here, 9 days. The players are all off until Monday. So they've got to get these guys back and get them on the field, because I think that's also having an effect on, we talked earlier about when things go bad, the team kind of has a body language and a letdown look to them. That's because they know they're not playing with their varsity team right now. They're playing with JV players. And when you have those pick sixes like that, it's very difficult to come back with the lack of firepower that you have. So that affects your confidence as a team too. And I think that's where Sean Payton was at his best. In those type of situations, he had almost a superhuman ability to get teams to play through adversity, but he's not here anymore. And this is kind of how the rest of the NFL lives. when they have these kind of situations. But you're right. There are other teams in the league that have a lot of injuries. I mean, the Cowboys have been playing without Dak Prescott and Tyron Smith. You know, they're missing all.
And they found a way to win.
And they've been winning. So you can't overcome, but you got to play smart, sound football, and the Saints aren't doing that at all right now.
And to go back to the earlier question about what the Saints do with the quarterback, and we talk about not having a first-round draft pick this year. What about Bailey Zappi? I think, what was he, a third or fourth-round pick out of Western Kentucky?
Right.
I mean, he's been fantastic for the New England Patriots. He's about to go back and sit on the bench. So, I mean, there are quarterbacks you can find. I mean, Tom Brady, for God's sake, was a sixth-round draft pick. You can find quarterbacks if you have the right. The one thing this team has is its ability to scout. I think that it has done that phenomenally across the years. We've had lapses through different parts, but there have been some great draft picks on this team, especially the last, to me, 8 to 10 years. And so if there's a quarterback out there that's not a first rounder, the Saints can find him. It's just a fact of whether they will or not. And Errol asked a question. We've kind of talked about it a little bit. Look, you can't, I'm kind of getting on I've said some things about Dennis Allen today that obviously shows that he has to progress in his coaching career. He has room to grow. He has to learn. I think he needs to find some emotion inside. I'm not ready to pull the plug on Dennis Allen yet. I mean, it's 7 games in, for God's sake. You can't talk about replacing your coach 7 games into basically his career. Forget about what he did with the Raiders before, Dunk. He is still learning on the job. He is going to find that intestinal fortitude, I guess is the way to say it, at some point. And when he does, who knows? Maybe the light will turn on.
Well, look, you got to understand, this is Mickey Loomis's hand-picked guy.
That's right.
Mickey Loomis isn't going to pull the plug on Dennis Allen. So people just need to forget about that silly notion right now. That's not going to happen. Dennis Allen has inherited a very difficult situation. I kind of feel for him because I think everybody likes Dennis Allen. And I think the locker room respects him. I don't think they don't not respect him, but this situation is kind of a Cat 5 disaster, and that's not what they anticipated. And he's in the middle of it, and the boat's taking on water. And right now, I would like to see a few of the players step up. I mean, like Dalvin Kamara did last night after the game. I think they need a few more guys like that, more take charge leadership out of this locker room, especially from the key guys. And that's part of the problem, Jim, is a lot of those guys are hurt right now on the sidelines. So they're not even playing. So it's hard for anybody like that to step up. There really is a little bit of a crisis of leadership, I think, in the locker room.
It's interesting you say that, because I have a problem with one particular player that I never thought I would have a problem with. And it goes to what you're talking about. And I never thought I would say this or see this, but I want to know where Demario Davis has been. There's been a couple times in the locker room where he just doesn't want to talk, and that's not what a captain's supposed to do. You look and see how Cam Jordan reacts. Cam Jordan will take any question that's ever asked of him, and not only that, he's the one that's stepping up on the sideline when stuff's going on. I haven't seen Demario Davis step up on the sideline or in the locker room, and again, I haven't seen a ton, so my limited sample size may be unfair. But what I've seen of Demario Davis is really not what I expected this year.
Yeah, he did. I don't know if he talked after the game last night. I did not get over to his locker, but I did see him walking out of the locker room, and he was just kind of talking to himself, saying, keep chopping wood, kind of a mantra, I guess, that some of the players have adopted. I know Jameis Winston's used that. But, but that's not really in his nature. He's more of a positive outlook kind of guy. And I think they're missing that kind of bad cop in the locker room. They need that. I agree. They don't really have that guy. And again, we're all like kind of trying to find solutions. And I don't think it's that simple. I think it's a bunch of things, myriad problems. And certainly leadership is being tested right now. And I haven't liked the way it's responded with this team in particular.
All right, about 5 minutes left in the live portion of Dattitude this morning. Jim Derry along with Jeff Duncan. Again, we do this every Friday morning at 9:15 a.m. Next week, we will be previewing the Saints game against the Las Vegas Raiders. And we kind of touched on the upcoming schedule, Dunk. We go for, I think now, and, I'm glad you're a little bit more positive than you were in your column this morning. I actually read it last night about one or two in the morning. You were talking about bringing the bags back out.
I didn't say that much. What I meant was somebody asked me about that on social media today. My point is 4 defensive touchdowns, 4 returns for touchdowns, 3 pick sixes in 7 games. I mean, that is Aints-like. I mean, those are the old Aints days where it was kind of a comedy of errors, and that's kind of what's happening right now with the Saints. Whatever could go wrong will go wrong. We said that earlier. That's what I meant by it. I mean, I think organizationally this team's a much better spot than those days, but the fact that you've had 4 giveaways, return for scores, and you're leading the league in turnovers, that's very much back-like.
Well, you go to me from a must-win. That's what we're talking this week was. Now you go to what's after a must-win? A must-3 wins. I mean, that's where you are right now. The Saints have no choice. If they don't win the next 3 games, Las Vegas at home, Baltimore at home, at Pittsburgh on the road against a bad Pittsburgh team, there's nothing anyone can say that convinced me that this season isn't over. So you're saying there's a chance? Yeah, a slight one. A very slight one, but it starts next week with Las Vegas. And Las Vegas, I mean, assuming they win this week, and they're playing the Houston Texans, so they should win this week, they're going to be in the same boat. Another team that's going to have the same record as the Saints. It'll be the 3rd straight week the Saints would play a team that has the same record as they do. So which one is going to fight, claw, and scratch and do everything they can do? The problem is Vegas is much more talented than a 2-5 team, so it's kind of misleading a little bit to me. Arizona was not as they deserve to be 2-4. I don't think they're very good. They're not going to go anywhere the rest of the season. They're only going to win 6 or 7 games this year. They lost to Seattle. They scored 9 points against a really, really bad Seattle defense, and somehow it scored 42 last night. So how did the Saints get ready? And again, you talk about 9 days off, which is a great thing for this team. They need it after the trip from London and all that. How did they turn around and change things and get themselves back in a winning spot in 9 days? Because they've got to find a way to start a roll.
Yeah, they've got to have an attitude, mindset of a sense of urgency, I think, most importantly. There is really no tomorrow now. When you're 2-5, and you can recover from that. I mean, the Eagles did it last year. The Saints did it, I think, in 1990. They made the playoffs, went on a big run after they started 2-5. So it can happen, but it's not going to happen by just magic pixie dust. They've got to get together, I think, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, Jim, is the leadership on this team has to kind of create an edge and a sense of urgency in the locker room. I think it has to come from the players more than the coaches right now. And we'll see if they can do it. And then it also, I mean, this is the obvious. They got to get Mike Thomas back and Marshawn Lattimore and some of these really key injured players that are their top playmakers on both sides of the ball. They've got to get those guys back. The thing that's frustrating about those injuries is they've been kind of ones that we didn't expect to go as long as they have. And I think that's created also, obviously, Mike Thomas, his injuries lingered longer because they didn't use him on the short-term IR. If they would have known that his injury was going to last 4 weeks, they would have put him on IR and could have used that roster spot. So there's a lot of things right now going against this team. There's no doubt.
They don't need to just get him back. They need to get those guys to want to come back. And I'm not saying all of them, but I'm not certain they all want to come back. And that's the key. And that this team has to find some heart. And you know what I think? One thing I think about Jameis Winston is, and Andy Dalton, it's good and bad. Andy Dalton is one of the most even-keeled quarterbacks you're ever going to see. He's the same after a win as he is after a loss. Now, he smiles after a win. That's fine. But I mean, he is just like this. And so a guy who could bounce back from a 3-interception game is Andy Dalton. But again, I think the Saints need some eating the dub, Dunk. They need some fire.
Yeah, and it could be Jameis time. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they do make a quarterback change next week and go back to Winston. I think that's going to be the biggest decision that Dennis Allen has to make. And I'm not sure that's going to be the answer because the team's playing so poorly in other areas. I think you made a point earlier about the defense. To me, that's kind of where this thing has to start. They've got to get the defense back playing, kind of back to their dominant days of last year, and we just have not seen that at all. and they've got to get that back. They've got to start. And sometimes these things can snowball. If all of a sudden you have a big game and you force some turnovers. Look at Arizona. They had not been playing that well defensively, and all of a sudden they get 2 pick sixes. And I'm sure they're feeling very confident today. So we'll see if they need another quarterback to throw them the ball the way Andy Dalton did last night.
All right. Well, before we let you go, I got 2 very quick questions. I will say this: the Saints before the game yesterday were 1-point favorites over the Raiders. So when the Raiders win this week, I would imagine it's going to be a pick 'em, and it's a line that I would see would actually move in the Raiders' favor. So I think the Saints may be a dog to a 2-5 team next week. I'm gonna have to do some research to see when's the last time they were a dog at home to a team that was 3 games under 500. It has to be a really long time. I'm gonna go do some research, but my guess is by this time next week, the Saints will be underdogs at home to Las Vegas Raiders. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Duncan, before we let you go, Tulane, Memphis. Does Tulane keep the ball rolling? They are 7-point favorites at home against Memphis at Yulman Stadium this week. Gotta like where they are. Do they win again?
Yeah, I'm going to be covering that game tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I definitely think they've got confidence right now. They're kind of the opposite of the Saints. They're playing with confidence. They're playing smart football, not beating themselves, and the wins are stacking up. And each win comes more confidence. I like. Definitely. I think they believe they can win the American Athletic Conference. If they were to
can too.
Jim, if they do that, I mean, we're talking about potentially like a New Year's Day bowl.
Yeah.
Which would be crazy for the
organization. From a 2-win team. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to watching them play. I think they've all kind of bought in right now to Chris Hampton defensively. Talking to some officials, NFL officials last night, they said it's going to be hard for Tulane to keep Chris Hampton. He's done such a good job with that defense. He's going to be a hot commodity in the coaching market in this offseason.
Great to see. It's a great story. The Tulane Green Wave, one of the great stories of this entire 2022 year so far. All right, LSU, turning out to be a pretty good story. 5-2. They are inexplicably 2-point favorites or 2.5-point favorites over Ole Miss, and this line has just all the big money is going to LSU. I don't understand it. It started off Ole Miss, I think it was plus 2.5 about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and now it's LSU 2.5. Dunk.
Is that right?
That's
I
right.
didn't know that.
It's been a 5-point swing in 2 weeks. All the big money's on LSU.
Well, what do you think? That was my column for our betting page this week. Was I love LSU in this game. Love them.
You do?
Yeah, they've won 6 in a row at home against Ole Miss. I know that isn't really applicable to a new set of players, but Ole Miss struggles to win at Tiger Stadium, and more importantly, Ole Miss hasn't really played a true tough road game all year. The only 2 road games were at Georgia Tech and at Vanderbilt. Those are maybe 2 of the easiest places to play in college football, certainly in the Deep South. So this is going to be their first real test, and their number 7 ranking to me is a little fraudulent.
I agree.
The only real test they've had this year was Kentucky, and it was all they could do to win at home.
And they played a backup quarterback.
Right, 22-19 in that game. They barely won. So to me, they're going to be walking into a totally hostile environment, and I think LSU and their fans will see this something as a second chance to make a statement. Because let's face it, that Tennessee game, I think a lot of people have overreacted to. That game got away from them right off the bat with the special teams errors early on, and Tennessee was able to dictate terms, and that thing snowballed on them. I think now they get a second chance, right, to make a statement, beat Ole Miss, and really kind of a statement game on your resume. So I love LSU on Saturday.
And Tennessee very well could be the best team in college football. I mean, when all is said and done, the way Hendon Hooker is playing, and I just like the way they're playing. They play with a lot of attitude. I wish the Saints would watch some Tennessee games. Maybe Alvin Kamara can go back and watch his alma mater play. All right, and look, you talk about Ole Miss too. Also, Dunk, what their defense did against Auburn last week. Auburn is awful on offense, and they were able to score 30-some-odd points on that Ole Miss defense. So there's hope for LSU if Jaden Daniels is playing pretty well right now.
Yeah, and look, he's coming off a breakout game, 6 touchdowns, so he should be playing with confidence. I think slowly but surely Brian Kelly and his staff have figured out what buttons to push, and I think they've done a tremendous job. I mean, I think even LSU fans, as high as their expectations are, have to be happy with them at 5-2 right now. If they can knock off Ole Miss, you're looking at 6-2, and the rest of their schedule, other than probably the Bama game,
all winnable.
All winnable, right? I mean, really, the SEC this year is the big three and everybody else.
Yeah, I agree.
And once you get past Bama, Georgia, and Tennessee, everybody's kind of even. And I think if LSU can position themselves to, to finish second in the SEC West, that would be not bad for what everyone, I think, thought was a transition year.
And lastly, you talk about the Pelicans, a big win against the Nets, not just because you win your first game, but, odds go from at Caesars plus 3,000 to win the championship to plus 2,000. They go from 30-1 to 20-1 with one victory. And I know that's crazy, so we're not going to go that crazy, but you have to be impressed by what you saw. Zion, obviously, and this is the understatement and Captain Obvious statement of the year, but, Zion obviously makes a difference to this team and shows what he can bring to the team that was already beginning to gel at the end of the last season.
I don't think the opener could have gone any better. I mean, everyone played well. Their big three all played well. Their role players played well. They dominated that game. I mean, really, they had the Nets down double digits in the first, 7 minutes of the game. It was kind of over. And I can tell you, last night at the Saints game, I was on the field before the game and saw a lot of executives from the organization, and everyone was talking about the Pelicans. And so were some of the other national reporters. So clearly a great start. Now they got to carry it over against Charlotte.
Why wouldn't you talk about the Pelicans? I mean, a lot of people are going to be a lot of people will be talking about that. Last comment we're going to show today is from Those Were the Days. That's kind of interesting. The best thing for the Saints to be is Sean Payton would take a head coaching job immediately so they could catch back desperately needed draft capital and draft a franchise quarterback. That's something, if he does want to come back, that is a possibility. So we'll get into that maybe next week. But the Saints,
good point.
They're going to get something out of Sean. If he wants to come back to coaching next year, the Saints are going to get something pretty good. And that would be a way to get a first-round draft pick. We'll see how that works out. Dunk, thanks for joining us from Scottsdale. We will talk to you next week. Have a safe trip home.
Thanks, buddy. We'll talk next week.
Talk to you next week. And thank you for joining the live portion of Dattitude. We will be back next Friday live at 9:15 a.m. The Dattitude Podcast, wherever you get your podcast, every Monday, every Thursday, every Friday. Although, with the caveat, we're taking this Monday off because it's been a long season already. I'm ready for my bye week. I'm going to take a couple days off. We will see you next week.